Hey YouTube, this is Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football, and we've got your quarterback start and sit video for week 7 of the NFL season. And hopefully this video helps you guys kind of determine who you should put in your lineup, or maybe you should sit maybe those star players to help you have a successful week in week 7. So let's jump right into it. Week 7 of the NFL is here, and of course we are talking quarterback position. This video will help you kind of figure out who you should put in your lineup at the quarterback spot. Most of you are probably in 10 or 12 man leagues, so we're talking players that are obviously in the top 12 and maybe some players that are outside of it that have some great matchups for this week. Now, there are two teams on a bye. You've got the Bears and the Cowboys, so that means no Caleb Williams, no Dak Prescott. That's okay. We've got a plethora of other quarterbacks that will help you out for this week. Now, Thursday night game is going to be the Broncos and Saints. We do have an early Sunday London game between the Patriots and Jacksonville Jaguars, and we have 2 Monday night games as well. So make sure you guys are prepared and ready. Stay tuned for any injury reports, things like that. And of course, hit up my waiver wire video if you haven't already and check that out to hopefully maybe get you a player or two that might need to be on your roster for this week. Now, these are your obvious starts at the quarterback position. I don't have a huge list. I do think some of these players I have on here have great matchups, or they're just absolute studs that will always consistently bring in points. Now, the first quarterback I'm going to mention as a good start this week is going to be Drake May versus the Jaguars. Yes, I said it, Drake May. What a great second game for May this week, though. He's got the Jaguars team he gets to play against who are absolutely struggling against the pass. This is the London game that I mentioned, and this is going to be a really, really early one, so make sure you guys are up for that. Jaguars are allowing the league worst 24 points per game to the quarterback position, also allowing 286 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns per game as well. This is a game I really feel May could have some confidence building type of game. Like, this is the game that I feel could help him out. Now, his receiving core isn't amazing, but if you watched my waiver wire video, I talked about Demario Douglas as a great option. And of course, I also mentioned Drake May as someone you may want to add, especially in Superflex or maybe some deeper leagues. I think he has a really good matchup this week. Another quarterback I really like this week is going to be Baker Mayfield versus the Ravens. Baker Mayfield comes into week 7 as quarterback 2 this season, only behind his opponent this week in Lamar Jackson. This should be a great game between both of these quarterbacks. Both should absolutely be in your lineups. Baker has a great matchup against a Ravens team that is absolutely allowing 20 points per game. They're also allowing the league most passing yards at 298 passing yards a game. With the Bucs defense struggling, allowing teams to go down the field, allowing the teams to score, Baker continuously has to be in that pass mode, and he should be able to continue his hot streak of 22 fantasy points per game even in this matchup. So I really like him a lot this week. Another quarterback I recommend this week is going to be Matthew Stafford versus the Raiders. Sure, Stafford has struggled this season, and a lot has to do with the fact that he's got really, I think, his wide receiver 3s and 4s playing for him right now due to the injuries to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. There is a good chance that Cooper Kupp does come back this week, and we are expecting Puka back next week. So if Cooper Kupp does come back this week, I think Stafford's value, of course, increases, and he's got a great matchup against the Raiders team that is allowing 23 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks. That was against Justin Fields, Bo Nix. They both have had great success. Now, the one advantage between both of them, they obviously are quarterbacks that are very athletic and can run the ball, which helps them a little bit in the fantasy aspect. But I do think, again, Raiders are they're not allowing a lot of passing yards, but they are allowing a touchdown and a rushing touchdown per game. So there's a nice little chance that maybe Stafford throws a passing touchdown and maybe rushes one in. But I do think this is a decent matchup for Matthew Stafford. And the last quarterback I want to recommend as a good start is going to be Sam Darnold versus the Lions. I mentioned Sam Darnold in my waiver wire video. I probably mentioned him almost every single week in my waiver wire video. But Sam's actually done a pretty good job this season. Now, prior to that dumpster game the Cowboys put up with only putting up 5 fantasy points against the Lions are actually allowing an average of 18 fantasy points per game. This is a great matchup for Sam Darnold and a rivalry game between the Vikings and Lions. Darnold finds himself in a good spot and definitely should improve upon this season. I think right now he's currently averaging 16 fantasy points per game. And part of that was he had a bad game, so it's kind of lowered a little bit. But this is a really good matchup. Lions are allowing 276 passing yards a game and a touchdown per game. And I do expect Jefferson and Addison to have some success. They are dealing with Aaron Jones possibly missing some time. They did trade for Cam Akers. I don't know how much that is going to make a big difference because Cam Akers didn't take advantage of his opportunities in that Houston offense when he was able to start. But again, Sam Darnold, I really like his matchup this week. Now, jumping into the sits, I've got Anthony Richardson as the first quarterback I don't like this week. He's going against the Dolphins, and Richardson right now didn't get to play in week 6, and he should be on pace to play in week 7. Richardson has struggled since his amazing week 1 performance. Since week 1, he's only been averaging 6.7 points per game in fantasy, and he's thrown 6 interceptions so far this season in the little bit amount of games he has played. What makes it worse is that his rushing ability really hasn't been there to offset some of his bad passing performance. It was okay when he was able to rush 50 to 60 yards, get a touchdown here or there, and that kind of offset his inability to really get the ball down the field accurately, get it to the wide receivers that he's got, because he's got a good receiving core. I like what he's got. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, like he's got some great options, but unfortunately, his development has not quite been there. So I do have some concerns. I'm really nervous for him this week. Unless his rushing ability just shows up, I'm going to sit him this week. Another quarterback I don't like this week is going to be Russell Wilson versus the Jets. Yes, Russell Wilson is expected to get his start for the Sunday night game between the Steelers and Jets. Now, this is a great matchup. Not a great matchup for him to start the season because realistically, the Jets are a really good defense. The Jets have been great against the pass, holding passers to only 205 yards a game, 11 fantasy points a game. And prior to Monday night's matchup, the Jets had only allowed 2 passing touchdowns as well. Now, the Buffalo Bills did have some success. Josh Allen had put up 3 touchdowns against the Jets, but that's not normal. Like, the Jets defense is legit and still very good, even with the injuries they've got going on. Russell Wilson's coming in with his calf injury supposedly gone, and we'll see how agile he is. I think Justin Fields behind that offensive line is still needed because they are not great at pass blocking, which I think is going to put up an issue for Russell Wilson, which is why I absolutely do not like him this week. Another quarterback I'm not crazy about is going to be CJ Stroud. I know it's a big name. He's going against the Green Bay Packers. The Packers aren't known to be a great defense, but I understand why you may start him. My concerns with Stroud this week is he hasn't been a top 10 fantasy quarterback so far. Like, with the lack of his rushing upside, Stroud really has to put up monster passing yards and at least 2 touchdowns per game to have a top 10 performance week in and week out in fantasy. Packers have actually allowed 10 passing touchdowns. So there's an opportunity for him, but in the last 2 weeks, the Packers have actually been really good against the pass. They've only allowed 2 passing touchdowns in those 2 games, and they're only allowing 12 fantasy points per game as well, which would put CJ Stroud outside of that top 10, which is where I expect him to be. So I do have some concerns there. I understand if you're going to play Stroud, he is a really good quarterback. He is a better real life quarterback than he is a fantasy quarterback. His lack of rushing and the fact that he has to throw a lot of yards, I don't really love it this week. And the last quarterback I'm going to mention as a sit, it's going to be Brock Purdy versus the Chiefs. The Chiefs are coming off a bye week, and that could mean trouble for Purdy and the 49ers. Chiefs currently are allowing 16 points per game to the quarterback position. And then last week, 3 weeks though, they've only been allowing 12 fantasy points per game. Purdy has been good. He's had some great games, and then he's had some dud games. His inconsistency is where I've had the biggest concern with him, and there's an easy chance where he only puts up, say, 12 points this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. I know he's got his weapons in Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Juwan Jennings. Like, he's got a great weapon, arsenal around him. There is a chance that maybe Jordan Mason misses. I do expect him to play, but there's a chance he misses. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey has been back. But the inconsistency is my concern, and the Chiefs defense has usually stepped up against quarterbacks like Brock Purdy. They've been able to get after them, been able to make some plays, and I don't have a good gut feeling for this one. I'm going to sit Brock Purdy. Now, my sleeper of the week is going to be Justin Herbert versus the Cardinals. Kind of crazy because Justin Herbert hasn't been great, but the Cardinals defense has not either. They've actually been allowing a decent amount of fantasy points and passing yards. And I think if the Chargers are going to try to keep up with the Cardinals, who have been on the downside, I think Herbert has to step up, and I think he has an opportunity to really, again, succeed and have some type of success. I'm not expecting him to be a top 10 quarterback, but I think he gets you about 14, 15 points. And if you need to start him this week, maybe you have Dak or Caleb and you can't get another good quarterback, I think he's worth a shot this week. So those are my start sits and sleepers for week 7 of the NFL season. Again, if you have questions, hit me up in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to help you guys out. If you haven't already, check out my other video on the waiver wire. Or again, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button while you're here, and I'll check you guys out next time.